Right. Hi everyone. Andy Skipper here from Cloud Direct. We're going to be talking today around creating a successful Azure migration strategy for 2023. We're starting a few minutes late, but that shouldn't make too much of a difference. In terms of the agenda, we're going to be obviously John and I are going to introduce ourselves in a second, but then we're going to move on a little bit into the cloud adoption framework, just a bit of an overview, and then looking at the strategy and plan parts of the cloud adoption framework in a bit more detail, moving through into some of the tooling that's available, and then talking about the common mistakes to avoid. So in terms of introductions, my name is Andy Skipper. I'm a Azure pre-sales architect here at Cloud Direct. I'm joined today by my colleague John. Do you want to just give a quick introduction, John?
Hi everyone, nice to meet you.
Fantastic. So before we move on, just a couple of little things. If you've got any questions as we go through, then please feel free to come off mute and raise them or put them into the chat. We are going to be going at a really fast pace. It's only a sort of 45 minutes to an hour, this one, and there's a lot of stuff to cover, so we are going to be going quite quickly. It's going to be at a relatively high level as well. So again, if you've got any questions, anything that you want to delve into it in a little more detail as we go through, then we can always take that offline as well. But it'd be good to hear from you as we go through this. So first off, overview of the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. Right. Oh, it's a buildy slide, is it? Okay, fine. So the Cloud Adoption Framework is a Microsoft standard, and it's been developed over thousands of migrations and cloud adoptions for Azure. It goes way beyond the technology. People generally think around migrations as technology based, and to a degree that they are, but there's a whole raft of other things that fit around that as well. So it's about taking an organization on a journey. It's around the people, the process, as well as the technology. And what the Cloud Adoption Framework provides you is the guidance and the tools through that process, and it's iterative. So it's about aligning your business and understanding your business goals, aligning that to how you're going to migrate, and aligning that to an output, and allowing you at the end of your cloud adoption to be able to look back and go, actually, yes, we've achieved what as a business we wanted to achieve. And it's an iterative process as well. So there might be multiple phases to that, depending on where you are in your cloud adoption cycle. And the aim is to achieve a balance between control and stability, but then also get you there and with the speed and the results that you're looking for. It generally breaks down Cloud Adoption Framework into these particular pieces, and they flow on one to the other. What we're going to be talking about today is the strategy piece, and then the plan that breaks that strategy down into a little further. The govern and manage elements that you see along the bottom there, they underpin all of those four pieces at the top. And as I said here, as I've said before, it's iterative. So while you may define a strategy, you may then have multiple plans that go through that as you have various phases to your strategy, depending on where you are in your cycle. And there's a number of tools that Microsoft provide that help you with your assessment of how ready you are. So there's just a number of them here that sort of focus on that front end piece, that strategy piece. So you've got the Cloud Journey Tracker, migration, the SMART tool, effectively the Strategic Migration Assessment and Readiness tool, and the governance benchmark. And what these tools do, they ask you a series of questions. They're all free. They're all online. There's some links later on in the deck about accessing these. And what these tools do is they provide you with areas where you maybe need to look at it in a little more detail. So the SMART tool in the middle there is pretty key, certainly when you're looking at that strategy and plan piece. And as you can see from the image there, it gives you an indication of where you may need areas to consider. So in the diagram there, you've got business cases red. And as part of the cloud adoption framework, there are a whole number of other tools that apply, and you can make use of templates, assessments that you, as you go through and as you move through the cloud adoption framework piece, that you can make use of. What we're going to start with today, what we're going to talk about next, is the strategy piece. And then I'm going to, after I've talked about strategy for a bit, I'm then going to pass on to John to talk about plan, and then some of the sort of future considerations that you need to make. So, define strategy. What we see a lot with cloud and cloud adoption is someone goes, "Oh, we should be using cloud," and then they launch straight into a project. They build some stuff out. And then it becomes a very organic adoption, you know, so they're already using it, but they're not using it in a particularly safe or secure way. They don't really understand what they're trying to achieve by it, other than, oh, cloud must be good. So the aim of the strategy piece is to provide a bit more structure and understanding about why you and your business are adopting cloud. It goes through, and I'll talk about these all these in a little more detail, but it goes through effectively, you know, understanding the motivations, why are you moving to cloud in the first place. It then tries to break that down into business outcomes. So what are you trying to achieve by moving to cloud? Now those two may seem closely, similar, but they are, you know, they're linked but separate. You know, motivation is a we want to move to save money. Business outcomes is about well, actually, you know, how are you going to measure that? What do you mean by save money? You know, it's maybe looking at you know, from a departmental level, or a individual teams of people who would define that business outcome. Then in terms of strategy, it's about evaluating your financial considerations. You know, there is a big shift between running your own DC and making use of cloud. So, you know, from a financial perspective, there's that sort of that switch from capex to opex. You're looking at the you know, understanding the total cost of ownership of what you're currently doing, comparing that to what you would be doing in the cloud. And again, it's not just about technology; it's about people and process as well. And then understanding the technology considerations. We're talking strategy here, so it's not, you know, it's not well, actually, how does this web server work? It's far more fundamental than that. You know, it's understanding that you may need to take a phased approach to this. It's understanding what your key apps are and what your technology considerations would be. You know, how do your skills and your processes align with that move? And ultimately, you know, what you're bringing all this together, you're defining the strategy with an ultimate goal to have that strategy, but also feed a lot of this information into a business case, which will get further refined as you go through a plan. So just going back over motivations, you know, why do you want to move? So some motivations align well with a migration strategy. The migrations at the top of the list will have a less business impact than those towards the bottom. So, you know, and these are typical migration motivations that we see. Most of them, I think, are relatively self-explanatory. And it's all, you know, and from a motivation perspective, this is the sort of granularity that you're looking for. What we then do as we move through motivations, and these are innovation-based motivations as well. So as you can see, there's a lot similar from the previous ones, but they're it just gives you a flavour of the type of things that you should be trying to capture as a business. You know, it's there's no point in, if you don't understand what your business is trying to achieve, then just launching in and adopting cloud. You know, if you meet those business objectives, great, but you've done it by luck, not through planning and implementation. So once you have your motivations, once you understand your motivations, it's then about, you know, what does that mean in terms of a business outcome? So you can have a motivation, and you can even have a business outcome, but it provides you with a measure, and it's key that your business outcomes are measurable, and you've defined how you measure them. So again, it's what does good look like, and how are we going to ascertain whether we've actually met that standard. Again, it forms that platform for everything that you do from that point on in terms of a migration. If your motivation is actually going to save some money, that's fine from a business outcomes perspective. What does that mean? Well, we want to get rid of our DC. That's going to save us X amount. We want to make less use of third-party suppliers, or spend on hardware. Well, fine. Okay, that saves you X amount. But obviously that needs to be balanced by what you're going to spend in the cloud. So ultimately, as a test at the end of it, you may have okay, fine, we're going to look at our invoices over the next 2 or 3 months of once we've made that migration. We're going to compare that to the numbers that we've got. Have we been successful? Yes, we have. And a lot of this data also is really good data that goes into that business case again as well, to provide that justification back to the business about why you're trying to adopt cloud in the first place. Brings us quite nicely onto financial considerations. So financial modelling it's with any business, as much as we like to think, it's a pure technology play or pure technology driven to this decision. Yes, we want to do it because it's great, it's shiny. There's always a financial element to it, and this is further complicated by generally there's a shift between that sort of capex, buying hardware every 5 years type model, to an OPEX paying for something monthly, or on a consumption basis. So when you're looking at the financial models and you're comparing what you spend now to what you're looking to spend in Azure, you need to look at the whole estate. So it's not just around sort of if you did it based off of, well, we were going to buy this server, but we're going to buy, take this VM in Azure now, doing that comparison. That's that doesn't reflect your total cost of ownership. You've got much more than a server. It sits within the data center. It consumes power. It can use aircon. It's you're renting something. You're paying hardware support. You've got a team of people that are supporting that. There are a whole raft of things that need to be considered. And then you can start building those models of what you spend now, and look what you're predicting to spend in Azure based off of a set of assumptions. And at this point, that's really all you can do from an Azure perspective. You base it on a set of assumptions, which you refine as you go through the various stages of the cloud adoption framework. And there are some myths, around the finance, and there's some generally with cloud migrations, you can generate an early return on investment. But you have to develop that clear business justification. So again, it's all about feeding into a business case to allow you to progress. And there are some myths, So there is I'm not going to go through all of these. We haven't got the time, unfortunately. But the first one there, cloud is always cheaper. Well, actually, in a lot of cases, it is. It is cheaper once you take everything into the round, but you have to do that analysis yourself, because for some niche cases, cloud isn't cheaper. So you can't just take that as a ballpark, as a not a ballpark, but as read that the cloud, the Azure that you'll be using will be in the long term will end up being cheaper than running your own DC. We then need to look at technical considerations, and again, matter of fact, we're talking about strategy here. So we're not talking about individual virtual machines or that type of piece. So we're talking broad brush, planning out how you think your estate and your technology will evolve. So this is just as an example here of the type of thing that we're talking about. So effectively what this is drawing out is effectively a multi-phase move to a future target state. So, you know, that phase one piece there is around platform and infrastructure modernization, moving through into some of the from a technology perspective, making use of some of the more cloud native type services, but also changing the way that you work as a business and as an organization as well. So aligning the two. So, you know, the phase two piece there is about implementing a more secure development lifecycle. And so this is just an example, but as you can see how you go through that, the phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ultimately you end up with almost a completely different shaped business. You know, as you've aligned your technology with your process and with the people skills that you have as well. You know, it's influencing. I mean, this is more akin to an ISV or a software seller, you know, but they're making use of things like marketplace and those types of things as well to actually change their business model and how they work. Future operating model. So this is key. It's not just about adoption, you know, as in, yes, we put stuff in Azure. It fundamentally changes the way that you operate. You know, you're no longer having to patch hypervisors. You're no longer having to worry about software licenses. You know, not software license, sorry, hardware support, that type of thing. The operating model is fundamentally different. And there's a number of different choices, and again it's iterative. So you may when you've got a very small footprint, you may look at a sort of a decentralized operations model, but then as you move through, as your estate within Azure grows, you then build on top of that, and the way you operate iterates as well. But all of this is good information to again flow into that business case, because it's going to drive cost. You know, there are changes that need to be made. You don't necessarily have to do them all at once, but it's good in a strategy to understand how you're going to get there. You know, and it's tied into the technology, it's tied into the process. As you say, you know, start small, and as your environment within Azure becomes more complex, then you change the way that you're going to operate it. And there is help as well, you know, in terms of cloud adoption. So there's Azure solution partners, us for example, but there are also Microsoft resources as well. So Microsoft Fast Track for Azure program, they can help, you know, accelerate your migration. And there's the AMP program as well, so the Azure Migration and Modernization program, which help with things like funding, but also putting you in touch with partners who can help you do certain things. The cloud adoption process, if you like, is there are elements of that you only ever really do once or twice. So actually, you know, do you really need the skill sets in-house to be able to do that? If you're only going to be doing that once or twice, maybe that's better to outsource. Maybe your better focus is actually on your operating model, for example, and how you're going to run and manage your estate going forward. But even that, if that's something you want to outsource, there are options there as well. So you have to think about where the best, what's the best time to bring in a partner, and what can you do in-house, and what you're looking to do in-house longer term. And then the sort of final part of the strategy piece really is to pick a first project. So the plan phase, which we'll get to in a second, we'll go into more detail and break things down in a little more detail. But this is good just to test the waters, to make sure that you're comfortable. It helps highlight gaps. My suggestion for a first cloud adoption project would not be nothing business critical or anything like that. But it's something that can help you formulate your strategy, can help formulate the plan that comes next as well. It helps identify things like skill set gaps and those types of things. So it should be done. It's something that can be done in parallel with development of the plan phase that's coming now. That being said, there are some, with the first cloud adoption project, there are definitely some guardrails that you want to put into place to make sure what you're doing is safe and secure as well. But it's not, it's not just a case of, oh yeah, well, open it up and let someone go and run and start moving stuff into Azure. There are still some processes and procedures that you want to be putting into place, but you can start quite small. As I said all the way through this, what we're actually looking to do is formulate a business case. So at the end of the strategy, you have your strategy that then starts to inform your business case. At this stage, there'll be a fair amount of assumptions, but it may well be enough to get some form of agreement and sign off with the business. Plan phase will add much more detail into that business case. So it will start, putting meat on the bones. We'll talk a bit about data gathering, but it will refine the cost model. The operating model will become quite a bit clearer as well. So planning. John, are you picking this one up? I can't remember where we said we switch.
Yeah, this is me.
Cool. Okay. Want me to share, or should I stop sharing?
No, you can stop sharing. Start.
Oh, you done it, yeah.
Right, hopefully you should see a new page with some numbers on it. Does that come through?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. All right, brilliant. Cheers. Thanks, Andy. So as Andy said, we're working our way through the cloud adoption framework. We've looked at defining our strategy, and now we've got the strategy in place. We understand our motivations and what our business outcomes are going to be, justifications. We now need to start looking at planning. So the idea of the plan really is to fix in place, you understand what you want to achieve, and this is the how and how you're going to achieve it. And this really is the kind of bulk of work that you're going to do before you kind of even really touch Azure in anger. 4 stages that are there. So rationalize your digital estate. So understand your estate. So we're going to have a look at that and how you go about doing that. So understand what I've got, and then make a decision about how I'm going to move it to the cloud. Initial organizational alignment. This is really important. This is about aligning parts of your business, certain individuals within that business, aligning them to the responsibilities that they will have as part of moving you to Azure. So cloud adoptions are complicated, which is why Microsoft have built this framework. So you have the best chance possible of making it as successful as possible, and they shared all this information, as we sort of said, based on thousands of engagements that they've already done. So you kind of got that best practice to be able to do that. Skills readiness plan. So if identifying a skills gap, if you're completely on-prem at the moment, you may well have played around with Azure, but what does that skills what does that sort of skills plan look like? What do I need day one? What do I need when I'm becoming operational? What do I need going forward in the future? What should I be looking to do? Am I going to upskill people in-house? Am I going to have to bring people in? We've mentioned working with partners to augment different skill sets, or do I need to go out into the market and look for people to bring them in? All of this feeds into your cloud adoption plan, and this is the commitment that you'll make to the plan. Document it, understand it, pass it around the business to make sure that everyone's bought in on this. And then once the cloud adoption plan has been finalized, you can go ahead and kind of execute on that and take you into the next stage, which is the ready phase. We're not talking about ready today, we're going to be talking about planning. So I'm just going to jump into a bit more detail on some of those points. So gone out of order here, just because I feel like this is really important to talk about cloud governance. As IT people, I'm an IT person. I grew up in IT and doing support and deployments. That left-hand side of the cloud adoption, completely makes sense to my brain. I'm going to do testing and development. I'm going to build my first landing zone. What platforms and technologies am I going to deploy? Which workloads am I going to migrate first? This is all actionable stuff that is easy for me to understand as a techie. That's what I want to do. It's really, really important to actually look at cloud governance. Cloud governance, having a team that provides cloud governance provides the necessary checks and balances to ensure that your cloud adoption doesn't expose your business to any new risks. So working on the cloud is a different beast. The workloads that you're going to move there and however you put them together will still be the same workloads that you support now, but how that is being delivered to your end users is going to change. There are certain risks that you will need to address, and when those risks need to be taken, your cloud governance team, will ensure that the proper processes are in place, controls are in place, and where possible, mitigations or where they can't mitigate that risk, proper governance is in place to make sure you're kind of monitoring, understanding what that is, and answering some of those questions. Things about how to keep my data safe, in a public cloud. But I think the one key one there that people don't potentially think about with governance, because it feels like it's a kind of roadblock or a stopping, it's not about that. It's 100% the other way. It's about how can we adopt faster. There is some adaptation you're going to have to make as a business, as IT team, as a technical team, and the cloud governance team are going to be key to being able to do that as quick as possible. It's about having, you don't take a kid day one and stick it on a motorbike. You have training wheels, perhaps they start off on a trike. It's that kind of process where you want to give your IT team and the technicians that are going to have a lot of work ahead of them in terms of kind of trying to drive this adoption. How can we make that as easy and safe for them to make sure that they don't expose us to undue risk? And that's hugely important from a business point of view, because as a business, if you make that first jump into the cloud with a workload, it either becomes really expensive and gets everyone's attention in the wrong way. Cloud's too expensive, we're not going to do it, and then your plan's gone out of place. Or it could be, something's been configured incorrectly, or additional access has been given to someone they shouldn't have it, or not been locked down. Again, same result. Pull the plug on that project, and you're kind of back to the drawing board and a lot of wasted effort. So as you said, I'm an IT person, and this is probably a lot of the stuff that you'll be thinking about as an IT person when it comes to moving to the cloud. So the first thing is to rationalise your digital estate, and that's by adopting the 5 R's of cloud adoption. There are different models. There's a 7, a 6, I think there's even an 8. For now, we're going to stick with the 5, and we'll kind of walk through what those are on the next slide. First thing to do is, what do I have? So that data you need to acquire using some form of tooling, and we'll talk about tooling and to help you with your migration later on. Scoping and assumption. So what is the scope of this project? The long-term plan may well be to move everything to Azure, but for this initial project, or for this phase of the project, my scope is actually going to be a singular workload. Maybe it's something that's being supported by hardware that's being retired. Perhaps it's something that you've seen some of the services that are available on Azure, and you're excited to think of how you can apply those to certain applications and certain workloads that you have already. So what's within scope? What assumptions are you making around? It may well be, right, we're going to assume that this is going to work in a PaaS environment, and that's how we're going to start building before we can start getting to the point of actually hands-on and testing. Then we need to do some modelling. This could be cost modelling. So looking at, this is what I want to move. I want to move it to this platform. What's the cost going to be? How does that relate to the cost that it costs the business now? How do I want to position that? What do I need to do in terms of to sort of make this safe? This is where you kind of bring in your cloud governance team, and then at that point doing an initial rationalisation of what you have. From our point of view as an MSP, we do individual workloads. We either seem to do first steps and then individual workloads, and we help customers do that. Sometimes it will be a data center exit where you're looking at absolutely everything, and in that case, you're doing perhaps less due diligence in terms of the amount of time you're spending on individual workloads. When you're just moving one, your focus is on that. You can get quite deep into it and do a lot more. If you're moving 1,000 servers, you're not going to be able to do that for everything. So you may focus on 2 or 3 really important workloads, the ones that make your sort of your company all its money. So when we talk about the 5 R's, this is what we're talking about: rehosting, refactoring, re-architecting, rebuilding, and replacing. If cloud adoption, if a lot of people talk about, oh, cloud, cloud first is our our focus. If that's right, then replacing stuff for SaaS where it's possible, is a really easy way to cloudify an app without you having to do a huge amount of work. The transaction takes place where the hosting, the maintenance, the updates, all of that gets handed off to the SaaS provider, and you're no longer responsible for that. It's just user logins and that sort of thing. That's the quickest route. If there's not a direct route to a SaaS option, or if it's cost prohibitive, looking at these other 4 is kind of where you will be. You've got an application, it's going to be sunsetted in a year. It's a bit of a old gnarly one that people don't want you to reboot ever in case it doesn't come back up, you don't really understand it. That's the sort of thing that you'd be looking at a rehost. Let's just lift and shift it for now. Or if you're doing a data center exit, we need to be out in 6 months. We've got 400 servers. Okay, we don't have time to to look at these other things. Let's rehost absolutely everything. Those are kind of the 2 sort of situations we see people using rehosting. Refactoring, slightly modifying a workload. So this can be something as simple as picking up a PaaS model like something like Azure Files. We've got a large file share. You can either move it into SharePoint, or perhaps it's an application that requires a file share specifically. We want to move into that. Refactoring that, you don't have to do anything to the files, or the fact that you've got sort of permissions and that kind of stuff in place. All of that just transfers. That's really simple. Straight away you're using a PaaS service and you haven't really had to do a huge amount to change it. Re-architecting, this is when you look at something that you want to move to, like a PaaS platform or a cloud native tooling, and there are some changes that you need to make to get this to transfer correctly. This could be tweaks to code. This could be perhaps a monolithic application that you decide that you want to split out. So you might do some work to split that out across a few different tiers, sort of database, app, and web front end, knowing that you can then pull that easily, or it's easier to analyze those and say, I'm going to move this into a web app. I'm going to move this into database as a service, but the app kind of server in the middle needs to stay. Rebuilding. So this is an application, doesn't translate well to an existing service. We need to pick it up and move it. We can't move it. It's not going to fit. There's too many changes. We're going to have to actually go about rebuilding it. So this could be, rebuilding something from a coding point of view. It could be, completely restructuring something that you do in the way it's kind of built to take advantage of application. Platform as a services within the Azure platform. One of the points there, you sort of read the slide, but the rationalization won't happen all at once. It's a really, really good point. You can have a first, as part of your planning, you can look at this as a kind of first pass. As you begin to move, as your kind of maturity begins to develop with cloud, you'll definitely revisit some of these. As more and more workloads are moving, you'll be looking back at the ones that you've moved. Take your learnings, take your experience. You may well want to change these as you go through the project. So scoping and migration planning, we're going to scope our migration candidates, look at those servers, what have we got? We've made a decision around the 5 R's. We defined the target technologies. So what am I going to adopt from a cloud native service? Am I moving stuff to IaaS? Spinning up some VMs? Am I moving stuff to PaaS using web services and SQL PaaS? Mapping dependencies, again, something you can do through tooling, which we'll talk about a little bit later. This is really important. If you've got, as we said, like a multi-tier application with a database backend, you move that application, it's an older application that isn't used to be, having parts of that application in 2 different places, having that, web front end calling to a database that's sitting in your DC because you can't move it, is a problem in terms of performance, and it won't work. You may well say, well, that's how I know this web app, pulls this SQL server, so I'll just move the SQL server with it. You need to check that SQL server isn't servicing anything that you're leaving on-prem, for the same reason. And then planning migration waves. So this could be looking at, we're looking to move everything into the cloud. We're going to do everything as a lift and shift, or we're going to do some transformation. How do we go about planning that? It's unlikely you're going to try and move a huge amount of workload all over one weekend. you'd be crazy to do that, to be honest. But you know, planning those migration waves. So you might look at some really easy wins. You know, we call them sort of low-hanging fruit, where you know it's easy to move. So you kind of get into the rhythm of what that looks like. You know, moving over a weekend. You know, working with a partner, or you know, working on the processes yourselves, and how that's done. And then you might want to take on a real, you know, big important application and get that moved, because you know that's one that's going to take the majority of the time to get that across. And once that's across, you know, everyone will kind of, you know, breathe a bit of a sigh of relief. It'll be nice and noticeable to the business will be aware of it, they'll be happy with, you know, the performance and with the that it's moved and it's now costing less, or you know, whatever the rationalizations have been, and then pick up others. So again, this is something you can work through, work out what is going to be the best thing for your business, and also the best thing for the people that are moving it, to make it as smooth and successful as possible. So we've got this up as an example, really. So you know, looking at skill sets. Sorry, it's looking at target state architecture. Here's an example of a company that's looking to migrate to Azure, and they want to adopt as much PaaS as possible. Their business is tied to the education sector, specifically higher education, and as such they have very seasonal workloads. At the moment they have to build for peak, and they know that if they can go away and just have those services switched on when they need them during term time, they're going to make significant savings from what they've currently got. They need to be adaptable as well. You know, they don't know how popular certain courses is going to be year to year, so how much infrastructure they need to support it. Again, the cloud lends itself to that, to be able to scale up and importantly scale down at times when people aren't as busy. They've got a mix of Docker-based applications that they've built in-house. They believe those will transfer well to AKS, and they've got some other monolithic apps that they plan to tweak. So you know, that refactoring, so they can split them across tiers for web app and DB. And then they've got a few legacy third-party applications where they can only really modernize the OS, and these will be lift and shift until a suitable, you know, SaaS replacement can be found. Looking at that, you know, the kind of the left-hand side, and you know, some of the networking is that kind of left-hand side of cloud adoption. You know, the engineering, the guys that are kind of doing the move, you know, perhaps working, you know, with other people to get that, because that's the hands-on stuff. The governance that we were talking about earlier, this is really those top two, and some of the third, the networking box. Really what we're looking at here is, you know, your governance, you know, could be things like your security team, from a networking point of view, will be involved in the firewall, but having someone that's in charge of governance, looking at things like Azure policy, you know, what can we do, what can we not do in the cloud, what do we not want to do in the cloud, where do we want to be, where does our data need to sit, all this sort of stuff gets handled by that governance. You know, your governance, whether it's a department with a makeup of different individuals from different departments, or one person like you know, chief security officer or something like that. So next thing to look at, you know, you've looked at what you've got, you understand what you want to do. You've assigned or you know, you've done initial organisation alignment. You've got the right people in the right place that are all bought into it, from a business, from a technical, from a security, from a governance. All these, everyone's bought into what we're going to do. You know, SMEs, all the rest of it. What do we need from Skillsets? So looking at those individuals, you know, these are the individuals that are going to make this cloud adoption plan a success. You know, what do we need in terms of skill sets? So this changes. You recognise this from early on when we're talking about sort of maturing stages of cloud. But for adoption, you know, typically the people that are, you know, doing these ungoverned early stage adoption will be innovation teams, developers, someone who's just a keen hobbyist, you know, someone from within the existing support team that has an interest in cloud and, you know, wants to be involved and is going to have a look at themselves. You know, these are all, you know, good examples of what people need, and you know, it's the skills are kind of being learned on the job. You know, might be doing a little bit of Microsoft Learn and getting a bit of information. That's kind of at that first stage. MVP best practice. So, you know, this is what we're going to do. What's our minimum viable product look like on Azure? What we're going to put in place. So here you need to be bringing in your architects. You know, someone needs to design this, needs to understand what the workload's going to be looking like. You know, governance. So you need to bring in your security team and who's looking at cloud governance for you as well. So you've gone through an MVP, it's been successful, you've done a pilot, you know, your business is happy, everyone's happy with that sort of thing. Right, we want to now expand this out into the rest of the workloads. So this is really where the burden, you know, for central IT is going to come. So all those sort of people we've had before that we've mentioned within that MVP are obviously all still in place. And then adding to that, you're looking at adding the support team. So okay, that's great. You know, majority of the stuff we're going to do is lift and shift. So there's something shouldn't change too much from a you know, from the way interfaces and how people access it and all the rest of it. You know, the support team will still need to understand, you know, how do I check, you know, that a server's not, you know, being, you know, high CPUs being run up, or you know, sort of something's going wrong with a server, or, you know, antivirus and all this kind of stuff. Where do I go to find that information? How do I do what I usually do from a support team? Strategic alignment. So this is looking more at the business and the key stakeholders within the business that are going to support the IT function. So supporting it right from the beginning. So the adoption, the MVP, you know, once it moves into support, you know, things like Azure fundamentals as a course that everyone that's going to touch Azure should be doing. You know, it allows you in the first instance to talk the same language. So if you're talking IaaS, PaaS, web services, app services, all these sorts of things, you know, if you can't communicate to your business, you know, it's really hard to get buy into that support plan. So that can be something that, you know, you can look at, and it's something you can get them to do kind of early on in the process. Operational, you know, alignment. So this is now, you know, operations. So where it differs perhaps from central IT is probably more about the support of the day-to-day. Operational alignment is, you know, looking at everyone within operations. So not just support teams, you know, everyone from a business point of view as well, account managers, your PMs, all of these people need to understand the platform, you know, not necessarily how it works, that's kind of the job of the IT team, but understand how it affects their role and how they need to be aligned, you know, to make the most of the platform as it stands. And then the last is maturity stage is a cloud center of excellence. So this is something where it's a kind of virtual construct that will consist of, you know, skill sets, you know, kind of beliefs around how the cloud should operate, what standards we're setting, what kind of tenants are in place. And this is, you know, for example, for us as an MSP, our cloud center of excellence is kind of centered around our support is the majority of the people that make up that cloud center of excellence. But there's people like myself, pre-sales, there's people in professional services that deliver our projects. There's PMs, there's strategic people sitting across that, from sort of tech leads and architects, right up to sort of CTO. And it's about defining what you want that center of excellence to look like, and kind of the standards that you want to set yourself for that center of excellence. That's kind of where you want to end up with, you know, running services within cloud. You know, so what do some of those skill sets, you know, look like? What are the things that people need to be able to do? So cloud strategy, you know, align technical change to the requirements of the business. That's an ongoing process. You know, cloud adoption doesn't start with just, you know, what's in your data center and moving it. We're now on the cloud. Yes, you are, but, you know, how do you adopt the mindset for cloud going forward? How do you deliver those technical solutions? Cloud governance, we've spoken about quite a bit, you know, really about managing risk. Centralized IT team, support from your existing IT staff, how does that need to be developed to allow them to support workloads in Azure? Cloud operations, supporting and operating, you know, your solutions, those that have been adopted for the cloud, you know, where those changes have gone, how does that affect how you operate as a business? The center of excellence, allowing you to improve quality, you know, speed of delivery, the resilience of your platform and of this cloud adoption. Once you're on that platform, you know, it doesn't stop. You can create baselines from either a security or an operation point of view, and then look to mature that platform. Cloud automation, this is where everyone should be aiming. You know, we'll talk about automation a little bit more in a minute, and then cloud security. So there's a summary of the cloud adoption plan. We're a little bit behind. I hope people can stay with us. We've got to finish off in a couple of minutes, just talking about the next step, which is migration tools. Azure Migrate is your main point of contact for tools. It allows you to address a lot of different workloads, and gives you kind of a centralized visibility of your estate, and is where we would start with most customers. In terms of move there, people might have heard of as a third-party ISV tool. Would have sat here until Microsoft bought it and then integrated with Azure Migrate. Dr. Migrate as well on the ISV tools is worth pointing out that bottom right. That is something that you deploy alongside Azure Migrate and gives you much more kind of much more visibility of your data and much more manipulation of the data is possible using that. The Azure Migrate is where you want to start. As you can see there, if you're doing a server migration, your assessment. So what have I got? What does it look like on the cloud? What do the costs look like? You can use it to actually do your migration. You can do the same for databases, and you can do the same for web apps, all integrated within one tool. We spoke about understanding the relationship between different workloads. Again, it's something that you can do through Azure Migrate to kind of understand that. Alongside Azure Migrate, there's some additional specific tools if you're looking to move one particular workload. The Azure App Service Assistant is one. That gives you the kind of automatic path to migrate .NET and PHP apps into Azure. You've also got the option to develop directly into Azure. If you're an ISV or yourselves or a development house, there's loads of tools that are in there, tools that you're probably already using, available straight within the platform. In terms of containers, we spoke about Docker. You can move into app services and stuff like that. AKS, there's integration with, again, lots of tools for deployment, already available, already natively within Azure. The data, again, Azure Database Migration Service, part of the Azure Migrate tool, it lets you look at your databases and what they would look like in terms of moving them to Azure. Not just for SQL anymore, but also got things in there for Postgres and other free database services as well. Common states to avoid. I'll let you take these away and read these, but essentially what we've included in here is some anti-patterns. There's a link in the document as well that will take you to the Microsoft Learn section where some of these are taken from. Understanding about things that you want to do from an adoption plan in terms of building that technical architecture and what it's going to look like. There are some common anti-patterns that are out there that Microsoft, again, in terms of the best practice they've developed from these thousands of engagements, they've seen lots of mistakes as well. And you get an option, you get the ability to be able to learn from those. But yeah, this one's really around sort of aligning different parts of the business and making sure that that ties up between IT and the business. And these ones really focus more on the actual architecture. So in terms of what you're designing, what you're going to put in place, rather than focus on perhaps sort of business alignment and things that are key to the business. All of it makes up part of your cloud adoption plan, and is key. You get this right, so really worth a look before you sort of sit down with your pen and paper and work out what your plan is going to look like. So that's it from us, from sort of sharing information around the cloud adoption framework. So between the defining strategy and planning part. If there's anything that you've seen today you want to know more about, get in contact. If there's a particular migration of a particular workload, or a data center exit or something like that, again, that you want to talk about, then yeah, please get in touch with us. And thank you for your time.